There comes a point on the spiritual path, often unexpected, often unwelcome, when truth no longer works. I do not mean that truth ceases to be true. I mean that the truth you know, the truth you can speak, the truth you can quote, the truth you have relied upon no longer produces peace, no longer brings healing, no longer quiets the heart. And this moment, when it comes, is not a failure. It is not a falling away. It is the very threshold of real spiritual living. Most students come to the spiritual life hungry, and rightly so. Hungry for release from fear, from lack, from disease, from confusion. They are taught truth, and truth serves them well for a time. They learn that God is omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. They learn that evil has no power, no presence, no law. They learn that man is spiritual, not material, that supply is infinite, that harmony is the nature of being. And in those early stages, these truths lift consciousness. They break superstition. They free one from many fears. They do a holy work. But there comes a day, and this is the day few are prepared for, when a student stands still with all the truth they know, and yet finds themselves unmoved. The words do not comfort. The affirmations do not reassure. The declarations sound hollow. The scriptures that once thrilled the heart now lie silent on the page. And the student wonders, what is wrong with me? Why is this not working anymore? Nothing is wrong. Something is ending. You see, truth was never meant to be a crutch. It was never meant to be a substitute for God. Truth is a finger pointing, but it is not the presence. Truth prepares consciousness, but it does not replace realization. And when the student unknowingly begins to rely on truth instead of God, truth itself becomes the barrier. Scripture hints at this more clearly than we often realize. The letter killeth, but the Spirit giveth life. That is not a condemnation of Scripture. It is a warning. The letter truth, in its verbal form, cannot give life. Only the Spirit can. And the Spirit is not reached through repetition, nor through correct statements, nor through the accumulation of understanding. There is a subtle arrogance that creeps into spiritual practice, though it is rarely recognized as such. It is the arrogance of the one who knows, the one who says, I know the truth about this situation. I know there is no power in appearances. I know God is the only power. And yet, beneath all that knowing, there remains tension, fear, striving, effort. Why? Because the one who knows is still trying to do something with God. The moment you are using truth, you are still in control. And as long as you are in control, God is not. Jesus never healed by reciting truth. He never stood at the tomb of Lazarus and declared metaphysical principles. He did not say, there is no death, there is no body, there is no condition. He lifted his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. That is not a statement of truth. That is recognition. That is relationship. That is surrender. And only then did the word go forth. There is a stage on the path where God quietly removes your props. The truths that once carried you are withdrawn, not because they were false, but because you have leaned on them too long. And when they fall away, you are left standing, exposed, uncertain, and often afraid. This is the shock. This is the desert. This is the place where the soul cries out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Not realizing that this cry is itself the doorway into deeper communion. Truth cannot save you. Truth cannot heal you. Truth cannot bring you peace. These are hard words, but they are necessary words. If truth could save, then the most learned would be the most free. If truth could heal, then every metaphysician would walk in unbroken harmony. If truth could bring peace, then understanding alone would end fear, but it does not, and it never was meant to. The truth you know must eventually be forgotten, not discarded in rebellion, but laid down in humility. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so too must truth be lifted up for a season. But even Moses did not enter the promised land. Law does not bring you in. Knowledge does not bring you in. Only grace does. And so, when truth no longer works, do not rush to find a new truth. Do not seek a higher statement, a deeper principle, a more refined teaching. This restlessness is only the mind searching for something to hold on to. Instead, be still. Let the shock do its work. Let the discomfort remain unresolved. Let the mind stand empty. For it is written, "Be still and know that I am God." Not think, not declare, not affirm. Be still. And in that stillness, something begins to stir, not in the intellect, not in the emotions, but in the depths of being. This is not truth speaking. This is God revealing himself. As the student progresses, there is a subtle shift that takes place, so subtle that it often goes unnoticed for years. At first, truth is received with humility. One listens, one learns, one practices. There is gratitude. There is wonder. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, truth begins to accumulate. It becomes stored. It becomes accessible. It becomes familiar. And then one day, without intending to, the student begins to rely on truth the way one once relied on medicine or money or influence. This is the danger point on the path. Spiritual knowledge was never given so that you might possess it. It was given so that it might dispossess you of fear, of superstition, of false concepts of God and man. But when knowledge itself becomes something you hold, something you reach for in moments of distress, something you apply to situations, it quietly takes the place of God. We are told, "Lean not unto thine own understanding." That does not refer only to human reasoning. It includes spiritual understanding as well. Any understanding that you lean on, any understanding that you depend upon, is still a form of self-reliance. And self-reliance, no matter how refined, is the very thing that blocks grace. Many students say, "But surely we must know the truth." Yes, truth must be known, but there is a vast difference between knowing truth and being established in God. Truth known may calm the mind. God realized transforms consciousness. You may know that God is omnipresent, yet still feel lonely. You may know that God is supply, yet still feel anxious about tomorrow. You may know that evil has no power, yet still react when appearances confront you. Why? Because knowledge, however correct, does not dissolve reaction. Only realization does. There comes a point where the mind says, "I have done everything right. I have spoken the truth. I have denied error. I have affirmed God, and yet nothing has changed." And in that moment, the mind grows tired. The effort grows heavy. And this weariness is not failure, it is mercy. It is the soul being gently led away from effort into surrender. Jesus warned of this when he said, "Ye search the scriptures, for in them ye think ye have eternal life, and they are they which testify of me, and ye will not come to me that ye might have life. The scriptures testify. They point, but they are not the life. And to stop at the testimony is to miss the presence. Spiritual knowledge becomes a barrier when it gives the illusion of progress without transformation. It allows one to speak wisely while remaining inwardly strained. It allows one to explain God while never resting in Him. It allows one to feel spiritually advanced while still reacting to appearances with fear, resentment, or hope. Hope itself, at this stage, becomes a barrier. Hope implies a future. Hope implies something yet to come, but God is not coming. God is, before Abraham was, I am. Not I will be, not I shall become. I am. As long as truth is being used to fix a condition, the condition remains central. As long as truth is being used to change appearances, appearances remain powerful in consciousness. But when truth has done its preparatory work, it must be released just as scaffolding is removed once the building stands. There is a sacred moment when the student must admit, quietly and honestly, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot think my way into God. I cannot speak my way into peace. I cannot heal by knowing. And that admission, though it feels like weakness, is in fact the beginning of strength. For when I am weak, then am I strong. Not weak in character, weak in self-reliance, weak in the belief that I must do something to bring God into the picture. The knowledge that once served you must now step aside, not because it was wrong, but because it has completed its task. John the Baptist said, He must increase, but I must decrease. And so it is with truth. Truth must decrease, not disappear, but withdraw, so that the Spirit may increase. And when this happens, you will notice something strange. You will find yourself less eager to speak truth, less anxious to correct error, less interested in explanations. There will be a growing silence within, a waiting, a listening, not because you are confused, but because something deeper than thought has begun to function. This is not regression. This is the doorway to maturity. There is a moment, quiet, almost unobservable, when the soul turns a corner. Nothing outward announces it, no voice declares it, yet inwardly something profound has shifted. The student no longer feels compelled to declare truth, not because truth is doubted, but because something deeper than declaration has begun to operate. Up to this point, the spiritual life has felt active. One spoke, one affirmed, one denied, one corrected thought, one applied principles. There was a sense of participation, even of responsibility. But now, gradually, the words fall away, not all at once, not dramatically, but gently, like leaves loosening from a tree at the end of a season. This is the great transition, the movement from speaking about God to listening for God. It is here that many become uneasy. Silence feels unproductive to the mind. The mind asks, what am I supposed to be doing now? And the answer, though rarely welcomed, is nothing. Nothing but yielding. Nothing but allowing. Nothing but ceasing from effort. Be still and know that I am God. This is not poetry. This is instruction. And it is the most difficult instruction ever given to the human mind because it requires the relinquishment of control. The mind is trained to do, to think, to solve, to improve. Stillness asks the mind to step aside. You see, God is not contacted through thought. Thought may take you to the threshold, but it cannot carry you across. Even the most exalted spiritual thoughts must eventually be relinquished. As long as thought is active, the mind is active. And as long as the mind is active, it stands between you and God. This does not mean we condemn thought. Thought has its rightful place. It prepares consciousness. It educates. It removes false beliefs. But when thought attempts to reach God, it fails every time. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. There must come a moment, even if it lasts only a fraction of a second, when thought stops. Not because you stop it, but because it has exhausted itself. And in that moment of cessation, something else takes over. Something that has always been present, but never dominant. The Spirit itself bears witness. This is not an emotional experience. It is often very quiet. There may be no visions, no sensations, no words, and yet there is a certainty, a recognition, an assurance that does not argue, does not reason, does not explain. It simply is. When prayer moves from declaration to receptivity, it ceases to be something you do. It becomes something that happens. You no longer pray to God, you pray from God. Or, more accurately, prayer prays itself through you. Jesus spoke of this when he said, "Take no thought what ye shall say, for it is not ye that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaketh in you." This is not limited to speech. It applies to healing, to guidance, to living itself. There comes a time when you are no longer the one initiating spiritual activity, you are the one permitting it. Many resist this stage because it feels like emptiness. The mind feels unoccupied. The familiar tools are gone. The old methods no longer satisfy. And the temptation is strong to go back to speak truth again, to work harder, to find a new technique. But to go back is to delay the inevitable. This emptiness is not absence. It is space. And space is required for God to be felt. The soul cannot be filled while it is cluttered with effort. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Poor in spirit does not mean lacking faith. It means lacking self-assertion. Receptivity is not passivity. It is alert surrender. It is the quiet awareness that says, I am here, I am listening, I am available. And availability is the highest form of prayer. In this stage, the student learns a new discipline, not the discipline of thought, but the discipline of restraint. The restraint from rushing in with answers. The restraint from naming the problem. The restraint from deciding what should happen. One learns to wait upon the Lord, not with impatience, but with trust. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. Not those who work hardest, not those who know the most, those who wait. And waiting, in the spiritual sense, is not inactivity. It is expectancy without demand. When this transition begins to take place, you will notice changes in your life. You will speak less, react less, defend yourself less. You will find that answers come without searching. That guidance appears without planning. That peace arises without explanation. And you will know without words that you are no longer trying to reach God. You are allowing God to reach you. At this stage of the journey, a very natural fear arises. It is rarely spoken aloud, but it is felt deeply. The fear is this: if I let go of truth, what is left? If I no longer declare, deny, affirm, or reason, will I not drift into emptiness? Will I not lose my spiritual footing? Will I not fall back into the very confusion and fear from which truth once rescued me? This fear must be met gently, because it arises from sincerity. It is the fear of one who has depended upon truth as a lifeline, and yet it is precisely here that the final misunderstanding must be dissolved. You are not being asked to abandon truth in favor of ignorance. You are not being asked to exchange light for darkness. You are being asked to release dependence on mental truth so that living truth may reveal itself. Truth, as we have known it, has been an activity of the mind. Even the highest truth, when held mentally, remains within the realm of thought. But God is not in the realm of thought. God is not a concept, not a principle to be applied, not a force to be directed. God is being itself, and being cannot be grasped, it can only be realized. When Moses asked, "Who shall I say sent me?" the answer was not a definition. It was not an explanation. It was not a theology. The answer was, "I am that I am." And even this was not meant to be analyzed. It was meant to be encountered. Forgetting truth does not mean denying it. It means ceasing to hold it as a tool. It means allowing it to recede into the background where it belongs. Just as one does not think of grammar while speaking fluently, so too one does not think of truth while living in God consciousness. There is a point where truth must become silent, and when it does, it has not failed, it has fulfilled its purpose. This silence can feel like nothingness to the mind because the mind equates activity with existence. But spiritual silence is not empty. It is full beyond words, full beyond thought. It is the fullness of presence, not yet translated into ideas. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. This is not a command to suppress thought by force. It is an invitation to reverence. Silence here is recognition. Silence is the natural response when the soul senses something greater than itself. In this silence, you are not drifting. You are resting. You are not falling away from God. You are falling into God. And this falling is safe, though the mind protests otherwise. There is a vast difference between emptiness and openness. Emptiness is the absence of meaning. Openness is the absence of resistance. And it is openness that allows grace to function. When truth is forgotten in this sense, you will notice that you are no longer attempting to solve life. You are no longer trying to make things happen spiritually. You are no longer measuring your progress. Instead, there is a quiet trust that whatever needs to be known will be known, whatever needs to be done will be done, and whatever needs to be healed will be healed without your mental participation. This is the meaning of, "The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace." Holding your peace does not mean ignoring life. It means refraining from interference. It means allowing the divine order to assert itself without obstruction. Here, the ego makes its final stand not in gross ways, but in refined ones. It says, "Surely I must still understand. Surely I must still know what is happening. Surely I must still be conscious of what God is doing. But even this must be surrendered. Canst thou by searching find out God? No. And the sooner this is accepted not as a doctrine, but as a lived fact, the sooner the burden of effort drops away. Forgetting truth, then, is not loss. It is relief. It is the relief of no longer needing to be right, no longer needing to be certain, no longer needing to be effective. It is the relief of finally allowing God to be God. And when this surrender deepens, something astonishing happens. Life begins to arrange itself without struggle. Needs are met without strain. Guidance comes without anxiety, not because you have mastered truth, but because you have stepped out of the way. This is not something to be achieved. It is something to be allowed. There comes a moment again, quiet and unannounced, when even the spiritual self steps aside. Not the sinful self, not the fearful self, but the devoted self. The practitioner, the one who has tried faithfully, sincerely, reverently to live by truth. This, too, must go. It is a tender moment and often misunderstood. For the practitioner has meant well. The practitioner has prayed, studied, meditated, served. The practitioner has sought to be faithful. And yet, there comes a time when the very presence of the practitioner stands in the way of God's full action. This is the meaning of the words, I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. Notice what is not said. It does not say, I live better. It does not say, I live spiritually. It says, yet not I. Something has ended. Something has been relinquished. The practitioner disappears not because they are unworthy, but because they are no longer needed. Up to this point, there has been a sense, however subtle, that I am doing something for God, or with God, or through God. But even this sense must dissolve, for as long as there is an I that is doing, there is a separation, refined, perhaps, but still present. True surrender does not say, I surrender. That would still be an action. True surrender happens when action ceases, when striving exhausts itself, when even the desire to surrender is no longer present. And in that moment, there is often a simple inner confession. I do not know. I cannot do. I yield. This yielding is not emotional. It is not dramatic. There are no fireworks here. There is often no feeling at all, only a release, a letting go, a sense that something heavy has been set down, and then sometimes immediately, sometimes quietly, over time, there is a change in consciousness. Not a change you can describe, but a change you can recognize. Fear loses its urgency. Problems lose their weight. Questions lose their demand for answers. Life begins to move with a gentler rhythm. Healing at this stage is no longer something you attempt. It is something that occurs. You may not even be aware of it at first. Someone tells you later that something shifted. A situation resolves itself without your intervention. A decision becomes clear without analysis. And you realize, I was not involved in this. Jesus said, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he seeth the Father do. This is not humility as virtue. This is humility as fact. It is the recognition that divine action is not cooperative, it is exclusive. God does not share authorship. When the practitioner disappears, there is no longer an effort to heal, to change, to improve. There is simply a standing aside. And in that standing aside, the Spirit moves freely. This is what is meant by grace. Grace is not God helping you do something. Grace is God doing when you have ceased trying. By grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God. Faith here is not belief. Faith is trust so complete that it no longer interferes. In this state, you will notice something else. Compassion deepens, but sentimentality fades. You care, but you do not cling. You love, but you do not possess. You are present, but you are not entangled. This is not detachment from life, it is freedom within life. The practitioner disappears, and with them disappears the burden of responsibility for outcomes. You are no longer trying to make things turn out right. You are allowing what is to reveal itself as it truly is. This is the place Jesus stood when he said, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit," not in defeat, in completion. And from this place, life flows not as a struggle, but as an expression. When the practitioner disappears, something else disappears with him, method. And this, perhaps more than anything else, is what unsettles the sincere student. For method gives the mind something to hold on to. Method gives structure, reassurance, a sense of direction. But method also implies control, and control has no place where grace operates. There is a stage in spiritual development where one must honestly face this question. If I am no longer using truth, no longer practicing techniques, no longer applying principles, how shall I live? And the answer is never given in words. The answer is lived. Grace does not operate through systems. Grace does not follow formulas. Grace does not respond to effort. Grace functions only where there is receptivity. And receptivity is not something you practice. It is something you become when effort has ceased. Jesus never taught a method of living. He revealed a way of being. Take no thought for your life, he said, not as a moral command, but as a description of spiritual consciousness. Consider the lilies of the field. They toil not, neither do they spin. This is not irresponsibility. It is effortless alignment. When grace is the only operator, you will notice that life becomes simpler, not necessarily easier, but simpler. Decisions arise without strain. Actions take place without inner debate. Words come when needed and remain absent when they are not. You find yourself doing what is required without planning your spirituality into it. This is not a life of passivity. It is a life of responsiveness. You respond, but you do not originate. You act, but you do not author. You participate, but you do not govern. And this distinction makes all the difference. Paul spoke from this consciousness when he said, "Not I, but Christ." He did not say, "Christ helps me." He did not say, "Christ inspires me." He said, "Christ liveth in me." That is not partnership. That is surrender. Living without a method does not mean you become careless or unwise. It means that wisdom is no longer manufactured. It is received. Guidance is no longer sought anxiously. It is recognized quietly. Supply is no longer pursued. It is found already present. At this stage, many students are tempted to ask, "But how do I know I am doing the right thing?" And again, the answer does not come in words. Rightness is not decided, it is felt. There is an inner rightness that has nothing to do with outcomes and everything to do with alignment. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, not planned, ordered. And ordering implies intelligence beyond the human mind. It implies a law at work that does not require your supervision. Grace does not need your help. It needs your consent. And consent is given not by effort, but by non-resistance, by not rushing ahead, by not forcing conclusions, by not insisting on understanding. When grace is operating, you may find that old habits of spiritual effort resurface from time to time. This is natural. Conditioning does not disappear overnight. But now, you recognize it for what it is, and you let it go. You no longer judge yourself for returning to effort. You simply return again to rest. There is no final arrival here. There is no permanent attainment. There is only a deepening trust, a growing willingness to let God be responsible for God's universe, including you. And in this way, life itself becomes prayer. Not a prayer spoken, but a prayer lived. Not an appeal, but an acceptance. Not a reaching out, but a resting within. This is grace. When grace becomes the operator of life, there arises an important and often misunderstood question. How do I live in this world without losing what has been found? For the world still presents demands. There are responsibilities, relationships, decisions, conflicts, and the temptation is strong to believe that one must now take up control again in order to function. But spiritual living does not require withdrawal from the world. It requires withdrawal from domination by the world. Jesus prayed, I pray not that thou shouldest take them out of the world, but that thou shouldest keep them from the evil. The evil here is not people or conditions. It is the belief that appearances govern reality. It is the belief that you must personally manage life in order for life to work. Returning to the world does not mean returning to effort. It means returning with a different center. You move, but you are not driven. You speak, but you are not compelled. You act, but you are not anxious about outcomes. At this stage, something very noticeable occurs. Reaction diminishes, not because you suppress it, but because there is less to react from. The old sense of a personal self standing apart from life begins to dissolve. And when there is no isolated self to defend, appearances lose their power. This is why non-reaction is not a discipline, it is a fruit. You do not practice non-reaction. You discover that reaction no longer arises with the same force. Faith is no longer something you summon. It is something you express by your stillness. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. Stayed, not forced, not held by effort, but resting. Peace here is not a feeling. It is stability. It is the absence of inner turbulence. In relationships, this shows itself as a new gentleness. You no longer need others to be different in order for you to be at peace. You listen more. You speak less. You stop trying to correct, to fix, to awaken. You trust the Christ in them as you have learned to trust the Christ in yourself. In work, you find that efficiency increases even as effort decreases. Things fall into place without strain. Guidance comes quietly. You may still plan, but planning is no longer anxious. You may still act decisively, but without inner pressure. In moments of conflict, you no longer rush to take sides, even when one side appears obviously right. You remember that your function is not to win, but to abide, not to dominate, but to witness. And often, without knowing how, harmony asserts itself where argument never could. This is not withdrawal from life. It is participation without entanglement. It is being in the world, but not of it. And this balance cannot be maintained by effort. It maintains itself as long as surrender remains alive. When control tries to return, and it will, you recognize it gently. You do not condemn yourself. You do not struggle against it. You simply let it pass. Control has lost its authority. It no longer defines you. And now we come to the end, not an ending, but a resting place. Not a conclusion, but a silence. At the deepest level of spiritual living, nothing is required of you. No understanding, no effort, no vigilance, no demonstration, no proof. There is only being. Be still and know. This knowing is not knowledge. It is recognition. It is the soul's quiet acknowledgement of that which has always been. Here, there is no need to ask God to do anything. There is no need to explain anything to yourself. There is no need to evaluate your state of consciousness. All of that belongs to the mind, and the mind is at rest. In this resting, you may notice that life continues exactly as before, and yet entirely differently. The same world, the same people, the same circumstances, but they no longer press upon you with the same urgency. You are not trying to escape them, nor are you trying to control them. You are simply present. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Want here does not mean lack. It means striving. Where the shepherd leads, striving ceases. There is nothing to add to this, nothing to take away, nothing to explain. And if, after this, words arise again, they arise differently. They arise not to teach, but to bless. Not to convince, but to point. And so we end where all true prayer ends, not with an answer, but with an awareness. Be still